Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradari. Yasoda Mandana Vajjana Manjana. Yes. Yashoda Nandana Vajjana Ranjana. Jamuna Dira Banachari. Jamuna Dira Banachari. Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradari. Yashoda Nandana Vajjana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Vajjana Ranjana. Jamuna Dira Banachari. Jamuna Dira Banachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Haribo. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Om Aganyati Mirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurin Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manubhistam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Pandeham Shri Guru Shri Jataha Pachakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Ragunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Saivaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishaka Nivitam Sha He Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Turabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Haribol. So we're continuing today in our series of lectures concerning the Damodarastakam prayers, the 8 prayers that glorify the exceptional and very intense relationship of Krishna with his transcendental mother, Mother Yasoda. And this is the season, the time of the year called Kartik, when devotees of Krishna focus on this very special pastime that is full of love and devotion and very intimate between Krishna and his mother. Usually the love of a mother for a child is very special, and even in the material sense, it's purer than other types of love. Now just imagine if the child is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his mother, Yasoda, who's a pure devotee of the Lord. And in the spiritual world, these very intimate relationships are possible because of the action of Yoga Maya. Yoga Maya is the internal energy of Krishna that sometimes reveals Krishna and sometimes hides Krishna. So in the Bhagavad Gita also it said, thank you, Prabhu, thank you very much, Hare Krishna. Naham prakasa sarvasya yogamaya samamritaha mudoyam nabijanati lokamam ajam avyayam. Krishna says that he does not reveal himself to everyone. And why is that? Well, he only reveals himself to his pure devotees. He explains in the Bhagavad Gita that as one surrenders unto him, he proportionately reveals himself to that devotee. So, and why is that? Because Krishna can easily offer someone liberation from birth and death by merging into his impersonal effulgence called the Brahmajyoti. But when it comes to pure devotional service, Krishna does not easily give that or bless someone with such an exalted position, because he becomes vulnerable due to the intense love and devotion of a devotee. So therefore, he can rather easily confer liberation from the cycle of birth and death and merging into the impersonal Brahman, effulgence emanating from his body. He gives that even to demons that he kills. But to be able to enter into his intimate pastimes with the Lord, and one of the most intimate is the relationship of Mother Yasoda with Krishna in the spiritual world, he reserves that only for those persons who are completely dedicated to him. Bhaktya mam abhijananti yavanyaschasmi tatprata tatumam tatvato gyatva vishtetat anantaram. Krishna clearly says in the Bhagavad Gita that it's only by devotional service that he can be attained, and not by any other means. It's the 18th chapter. So, of Bhagavad Gita, 54th verse. So, therefore, 55th verse. So, therefore, someone of Mother Yasoda's caliber, she's completely dedicated to him, and therefore, she forgets that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that she can have a very intimate and loving relationship with the Lord. So last week we covered what's called the introduction to this very nectarine pastime, and we talked about tattva vishesha. Vishesha means excellence or perfection. So the excellence of understanding the supreme absolute truth was explained last week, and along with that, Krishna's unique quality of Satchitananda Vigraha or Satchitananda Rupam, his transcendental form of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, and how he is the origin of everything. In other words, of all the expansions of himself in the spiritual world, beginning with Lord Balaram and the different Narayana expansions, and then expansions in the material world, such as Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and Kshirodakshay Vishnu, and then expansions from Kshirodakshay Vishnu to the different avatars. And there's 6 types of avatars. There's a Shaktavish avatar, there's the Manvantara avatar, there's the Guna avatar, there's the Leela avatar, there's Purusha avatar, and so forth. and then all the living entities like you and me, and then the entire material creation, the material elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and mind, intelligence, and false ego, and so forth. So, and all the different species, 8,400,000 species of living entities. So all these things are coming from him and his energy. So that's a great science. It's called the science of Krishna, to understand the origin of the material creation and the existence of the spiritual world. In modern scientists, they only know a little bit about the material world. They ignore completely the existence of the spiritual world. So now we're going to continue. We discussed all these points last week, and now we're going to continue with what's called Rupa Vishesha, the excellence of his beauty. And this is exemplified by the fact that he has what's called lasant, these swinging shark-shaped earrings. And they're manifested especially when he runs away from his mother, because he has broken some pots of ghee and distributed them to his friends and to the monkeys. And now he perceives that his mother is looking for him, and he begins to run away from her in fear, because he'll be punished for his naughtiness. So this is something very natural. Children sometimes do naughty things, and they don't like to get caught. And if they are caught, sometimes they say, I didn't do anything, But here Mother Yasoda is caught him red-handed. And why did he do this? Well, because as we understood last week, he was waking up, and when he woke up from sleep, his mother took him in her arms and was letting him drink her milk, and Krishna was happy. But then she was boiling some milk to make some sweets for Krishna, and it overboiled, and it ran over into the pot, and she immediately put her child down and ran to the milk pot, and Krishna became very angry, that why is she leaving me like this? And he decided to do some mischief, and the mischief was he was going to he broke some pots of clay pots of holding ghee and butter and so forth. So we heard about that last week, but now he is running away from his mother, who's trying to catch him for being a naughty boy, and his earrings, these beautiful shark-shaped earrings, are moving and touching his face. Now the earrings are very attractive, but they become even more attractive by touching his face, because his body is the source of real beauty. So these earrings are sport upon his face or his cheeks as a result of his continuously playing in this transcendental pastime of childhood. Thus his divinely splendorous face is especially portrayed. Yet another meaning of this Lasat Kundalam is due to the Maha Sobhagya, or great fortune, of personally kissing his divine cheeks. So in other words, the earrings themselves are beautiful, but because they actually touch the cheeks of Krishna's face, they become even more beautiful, because he is the source of all beauty. Now, this is something that's difficult to understand. It's such a delicate detail. And why is it? Because Krishna is the source of everything. Janmadasya yata nivya itaratas charteso vigyasura. Everything is emanating from him. That means the whole material, the whole spiritual world, the entire material world, all the living entities and so forth, all his personal expansions and avatars. And also, his body is the source of all beauty. So his earrings attained a position of super excellence above all other ornaments. And anything that touches his body becomes even more beautiful. And so this super excellence indicates the fortune of the other ornaments on his body. And he has many other beautiful ornaments. And this super excellence indicates the fortune of other ornaments adorning his various limbs. Furthermore, lasanti indicates that these earrings are glistening because they are enriched with the splendorous effulgence of the Lord's bodily complexion. Therefore, Krishna's body is the ornament of his ornaments. This is the meaning, and consequently it's stated by the gopis in the 10th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 29th chapter, 40th verse. O Sri Krishna, by seeing your beauty, which attracts the three worlds, these cows, birds, trees, and deer are all experiencing their hairs standing on end. What is the wonder then if we are all also bewildered? So just imagine if you ever were able to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, you would be flummoxed, or in a sense confused, in a sense of seeing such a beautiful person. And everything about him, everything that he even comes in contact with also becomes beautiful. This is a simple, a little inkling or a little perception of the magnificent darshan of the Lord, where not only he is beautiful, but everything around him becomes beautiful. Anything that touches him becomes beautiful. And therefore, one is stunned by such a darshan, or such a vision of the Lord. And being the source of everything, of riches, beauty, and power, and knowledge, and strength, and all these different opulences of the Lord, such a vision would stun you, and you would be overwhelmed and ecstatically, let's say, contemplating such a beautiful vision of the Lord. So in the 3rd canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, also the 3rd canto, 2nd chapter, 12th verse, is also stated by Sri Uddhava to Vidura regarding Sri Krishna's beauty. Sri Krishna's beauty is so enchanting that it even astonishes himself. That beauty represents the supreme zenith of great opulence, so much so that he is actually the ornament of his ornaments. That's the whole point. Now, sometimes some men or some women can get dressed very luxuriously, have also jewelry, and different types of ornaments and nice clothes, and people are very impressed by that. And in the sense that they may even put on makeup and other things, and eyelashes, and this thing, and mascara, and so forth, and they seem to be very beautiful. But in the case of Krishna, it's his body which is the source of exquisite, indescribable beauty. That's why in the spiritual world everyone is eternal. So there's no need for reproduction as in the material world. So therefore, there's no existence of mundane sense gratification there. However, there is something that we cannot even imagine, that is ecstatic feelings of love that are expressed by facial gestures, by the eyebrows, by the movement of the eyebrows, by physical gestures of the body of the Lord, that put people in ecstasy all the time in the spiritual world. There's no such thing as mundane sex, but there's something much greater than that. And these are the emotions that are evoked by the exquisite beauty of the Lord and his facial gestures, the movement of his eyebrows, the movement of his lips, and the way he plays his flute, and other things that put people in ecstatic mode of love for the Lord and attract them to the Lord. And this is something that's not understood. It is sometimes referred to as lusty feelings, but it's not the lust of the material world. It's this transcendental love that is expressed. So in this pastime of Mother Yasoda, there's this ecstatic feeling that comes not because she wants to punish her child, but because of the emotions that are evoked by this pastime. And then it goes deeper into that. It says there's a further Vishesha or excellence called Parivara Vishesha, or attributes of his family portray his unique excellence. So in other words, he is surrounded by people who express very intense love for him. And that's another excellence of the Lord. It's not only himself, but it's also the devotees that are around him. And therefore, the word Gokule. So we have to be able to follow the words also of the first verse of the Damodarastakam. So it says, Namamishwaram Satchitananda Rupam. Okay, we discussed that. Now, we just finished discussing Lasat Kundalam, and now it's Gokule Brajamanam. So this word Gokule, see how intensely packed are the Sanskrit words and poetry and the imagery that's evoked by this poetry that we're tasting now. This is something different. I mean, obviously, sometimes if there's a great poet and he speaks something, and people sort of taste the intent in the words and the colors of the words and the imagery of the words and things like that. But this is going much deeper than that. This is transcendental poetry. It's not mundane poetry. And every word has very deep significance. So now we're looking at this Vishesha, a Parivara Vishesha, the excellence of the attributes of his family and his friends. So the word Gokule indicates that place where Gopas, the cowherd boys, Gopis, the cowherd girls, the cows, the calves, and so forth reside. All these close relatives of the Lord. And they're in different types of relationships. Some are neutral, and we talked about this also last week. Some are servitors involved in serving the Lord. Some are involved as friends of the Lord. Some of these relationships are parental, like in the case of Mother Yasoda herself, and some are conjugal. So the word Brajamanam, so this Gokule Brajamanam, indicates a particularly befitting place where the Lord can manifest an excellence that surpasses that of previous pastimes of the Lord. Moreover, he is splendorous because only in Gokula does he manifest his Swabhavika Shobha, or most natural characteristics of brilliance. So this word Swabhavika means a type of very relishable, very attractive, very intense beauty and emotion that is evoked by seeing such a thing. And so the natural characteristics of brilliance. So what does that mean exactly? Well, obviously, the entire Brahma Jyoti, or this brilliant light of eternity, is being effused from the body of Krishna. He is the source of all beauty, and he makes everything beautiful also that comes in contact with him. So here it says in these two words, Gokule Brajamanam, also everyone in contact with him, like his family members, his friends, his lovers, his parents, and so forth, they are also part of that tremendous vision where he's surrounded by these people that and these animals and these trees and birds. They love him with such intensity. That's an opulence of the Lord. Moreover, he is splendorous because only in Gokula does he manifest his svabhavika soba, or most natural characteristics of brilliance. So there are two major parts of the spiritual world. One is called Vaikuntha, and the other is called Goloka. In Vaikuntha, there's the devotees there are perfect in their relationships, and they worship Krishna in his form as Narayana, who is worshipped with awe and reverence, and everything is in a perfect form. But when you go higher to Goloka, all that perfection seems to melt away by intense love for the Lord, where people don't follow the rules and regulations or any rules of formality anymore. And because of their pure love for the Lord, there's no more formality involved. There's intense intimacy. And this is something that's incomprehensible for most people, even for some classes of devotees, because they can deal with formality, worshiping the Lord with awe and reverence, and not being, let's say, too intimate with the Lord, but yet loving the Lord for his perfection in every way. And they also attain a similar type of perfection, living in the same planet or living in the same proximity with the Lord, worshiping him with awe and reverence, and with rituals and beautiful prayers glorifying the Lord's transcendental qualities. But when we come to Goloka Vrindavan, all that seems to disappear, and now there's this incredible intimacy with the Lord. And this is a very, let's say, private thing in many ways, because to be intimate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is something absolutely exceptional. And in order to do that, one has to forget that he's God. And one has to think that this is my friend, or this is my servant, or this is my mother or father, and this is my son. Or this is my lover, like in the Madhurya rasa. So you have these different rasas or relishable relationships with the Lord that are intimate. So here it says, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, who sits upon the asana or seat formed in the lotus-like hearts of the Siddha yogis. Those are the yogis who attain perfection of mystical powers, manifesting a body that is the abode of all the splendor of the three worlds. He sat upon the seat or asana presented by the gopis, was worshipped by them, and thereby radiated even more splendor. His excellence. So this is the reciprocal, let's call it, splendor of loving devotees and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's going in 360 degrees of mutual enhancement of love and devotion. And it's something that we can try and express with words. It's something that we can try and visualize, but unless one develops pure love for Krishna, one cannot actually experience it. So therefore, there's a great benefit in trying to advance spiritually by hearing these things, by meditating on these things, and by engaging in devotional service. It's only through devotional service that can one attain such a state of pure love of the Lord. Just like even in this life, we have some people who are acquaintances. We have some of those acquaintances who are friends. We have some who are very close friends. We have some who are relatives, and some relatives who are very close to us, and we relish those very close relationships. And but the closer you come, and the more affection there is, there's a certain intimacy about it and privacy about it. I remember one time I saw a mother and her son dancing. This was in the and at one point they both had tears in their eyes. And I was looking with I was a little perplexed. Why are there tears in their eyes? They're supposed to be happy when they're dancing, right? So I didn't know why they were both crying. It was something private that they knew between themselves, right? Like maybe they were thinking about a father who had died, and in this moment where they're happy, but then their hearts went toward remembering the father that died. Something was there that I didn't know about. It was a private thing, right? But because they were crying, I realized that they were experiencing something that I had no knowledge of. But obviously they were experiencing it, and I wasn't. So in the same way, when we're hearing now about something that is very private, these intimate, loving relationships between Krishna and his devotees, and it has to be private, because unless we attain that same state of love for the Lord through sustained devotional service, we can never enter into that world. It's very exclusive. And just like when I saw the mother and son dancing, and then all of a sudden they were crying, I had no way of entering into that emotion myself, because I didn't have the experience that they did. So that is the parivara vishesha, the excellence of the attributes of his family, which portrays his unique excellence. So Krishna evokes these very intense feelings of love, and one cannot really understand them unless one comes close to Krishna, as these transcendental associates are. So then the next excellence is called Lila Vishesha. Vishesha means excellence, or the attributes of his pastimes. And they're stated in the last two lines of the verse. The verse, which is the first verse. Yasoda biyo yula kalad davamanam param jistam adyantato drutya gopya. So the word Yasoda indicates Yasodaya, or from his. Actually, are these things? It's not showing. He's not there. It's not on. Look. Technology. Yeah, okay. So, Yasoda biyo ukala davamanam. What does this mean? So, Yasoda, what does her name mean? It means one who gives fame. And Yasodaya means from his mother, or Sri Yasoda. So, you can see how every word in Sanskrit, especially this most elevated Sanskrit, has deep meanings and evokes deep sentiments. It's in other words, just to give an example of this, when you have let's say a Bharatanatyam dancer, and she or he portrays a pastime of the Lord. And how does the Bharatanatyam dancer portray this pastime of the Lord? Well, real Bharatanatyam dancers are not just technicians of movement, but they are expressing transcendental emotions called sattvika bhava by the movements of their face and hands, the mudras that they form, and movements of their body in such a way that it can raise the consciousness of the spectators who enter into the same emotions that the dancer is expressing and feeling. And these dances were only meant for the pleasure of Krishna in the Krishna temples in India, such as Jagannath Puri and other great temples. And it was performed for the pleasure of the Lord, not for the pleasure of the audience. Normally the dancer dances facing the audience, but these dancers would always be facing the deities, and sometimes a little bit to the audience, but mainly to the deities. And there was this communication between the dancer and the deity of Krishna that was intense. And the audience also experienced this intensity of love and devotion for the deity that the dancer was evoking by her movements and her facial expressions and the emotional feelings that she was experiencing. The audience could also experience it. Now, this is not what you usually see in modern Bharatanatyam dancing, because the dancers had to be pure devotees. They were celibate women. Of course, after the British came and contaminated everything in England, in India, some of the dancers became degenerate. But in the previous times, when there was pure devotion involved, the dancers were able to elevate the consciousness of the people to actually experience her emotions of love for the deity and enter into this private area of pure love and devotion. So in here it says Bia, when it says Yasoda Biyo Lukat, so Bia means fear of being punished for Krishna's offense of breaking the yogurt pots and stealing fresh butter and so forth. So Krishna himself is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for some, evokes fear. Even fear is afraid of Krishna. Say, but here's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's expressing fear of his mother, who is coming with a stick in her hand and is looking for him because he did this really naughty thing. Why did he do it? Because he was upset that his mother left him without suckling her anymore. She ran for the overflowing pot of boiling milk, and he became upset. Why did she leave me like this? So he decided to be naughty. Now, that's normal of kids. Little young, very young children, sometimes they express the same type of emotions. And they purposely do some naughtiness to get the attention of the mother. Well, here the mother, Yasoda, is coming with a stick in her hand and sneaking up and spying on Krishna to see what he's doing. And then she sees him in the act of breaking pots, and then especially disseminating or giving the butter to his friends and to the monkeys on top of that. So his offense of breaking the yogurt pot, stealing the fresh butter, and so forth. And then it says ulukalat, denotes from the mortar. So in order to do this, he took a mortar, and the mortar is a construct in which you put spices or grains or something, and you beat it with a pestle, and you make it into a powder, right? It's a grinder in a sense. And he turns it upside down so you can step on it to reach the pots that are hanging from the ceiling. Oftentimes, in order to protect the pots of butter and ghee, they would hang it from the ceiling so that monkeys and even people couldn't reach it, right? So Krishna's a little boy, very, very young. And in order to reach it, he makes this sort of step ladder of this mortar, and is very clever. And she sees him on the mortar, putting his hand into the pot and giving the butter to the monkeys and the boys. So Uluk Kalat, as it says here, Yasoda Bilu Kalad Davamanam, is referring to this scene. And in order to steal the fresh butter suspended from the rafters, he took a large wooden grinding mortar that was kept in the same room, storeroom, turned it on end, and climbed up on it. But spotting his mother coming into the room with a stick in her hand, he immediately gets down again. Davamanam, he speedily runs away. In this regard, if one desires to know the particulars of this pastime, it can be found in the 10th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam 10:9, 8-9. So the Srimad Bhagavatam was written by Vyasadeva in his maturity, after he had compiled the 4 original Vedas with the 108 Upanishads as sections of those Vedas, and then after that the Puranas, the ancient histories, from the beginning of time to up until the Battle of Kurukshetra, and you have the Mahabharata, which is also a history from the beginning of time to the Battle of Kurukshetra. The Puranas were ancient histories, and then some of them are retold in the Mahabharata, and then after the Mahabharata, the Vedanta Sutra, which is the extreme philosophical treatise explaining Krishna without going too much into his personality, but into his qualities. And then after all that literature, which is thousands and thousands of verses and paragraphs and chapters, Vyasadeva felt dissatisfied. And he wasn't sure why. And therefore, he asked his guru, Narada Muni, why am I feeling like this? And Narada Muni said, well, because you wrote all this literature, but you gave more attention to ritual performances and not enough attention to amplifying the fact that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And these sacrifices or rituals are meant for appeasing different demigods. And therefore, if one reads all that tremendous literature, they're not quite sure that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because most of the literature is about performing ritual sacrifices to different demigods. Of course, the Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata, but it's one little chapter in a gigantic tome of literature. So it's somewhat dwarfed and obscured by the sheer volume of what was written. So then Narada Muni told Vyasadeva, now look, just focus on what is the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. So the Bhagavatam is only about Krishna. And it is called the Amala Purana. There's no mistake in it. There's no imperfection in it. It is the perfect, supreme, absolute truth, personality of Godhead, and it's the science of Krishna. And science is something that is always true in all realms of reference. That is real science. It's not true only in a particular frame of reference. The supreme absolute truth is the description of God, and the Supreme Absolute Truth is true in all references, whether it's the material world or the spiritual world. The same truth is predictable, the same truth is coherent, and is never diminished. And it's true in the past, in the present, and the future. So that is what's called the Supreme Absolute Truth, science of Krishna. Science is something that's predictable. Science is something that is not, real science is not subject to particular conditions. It is true in all conditions. So the science of Krishna is the highest scientific knowledge of the Supreme Absolute Truth. And therefore, this verse now from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 9th chapter, 8th and 9th verse says, "Then Sri Krishna turned the grinding mortar on end, climbed up on it, and began distributing the fresh butter hanging from the rafters to the monkeys as freely as he liked. Due to knowledge of his own mischievous thievery, his eyes fearfully darted this way and that. Mother Yasoda saw him doing this and so slowly crept up from behind to catch him. But he noticed her coming with a stick in her hand, and he quickly got down from the mortar and started running away. Just like a person stricken with fear, even though highly advanced yogis are enabled by the strength of their penances to merge their minds with Brahma, still they cannot get a glimpse of this scene of Mother Yasoda Devi chasing her son Krishna from behind while attempting to catch him." Now, how come we're spending so much attention to this pastime? Because it is full of transcendental ecstasy, and it's full of transcendental truth about the Supreme Absolute Truth, Krishna, and his mother, who has this extreme love for him, and they're exchanging their loving relationship through these pastimes. Just like if you go to a movie today, usually there's 5 minutes of fear, 5 minutes of action, 5 minutes of love, and these changing emotions are being evoked by these different scenes in the movie, right? And it affects the person that's watching. It piques their interest, and they keep watching this movie, even though it might be a very silly movie or a nonsense movie. Still, they keep watching it because of these changing emotions that are being evoked by the actions in the movie. Well, that's a nonsense movie in the material world. And now we're not talking about a nonsense movie. We're talking about the relationship of extreme love between Mother Yasoda, the mother of Krishna, although Krishna has no mother, because he is the source of everything, but yet he accepts the desires of his devotees to relate to him in these particular ways. So some people like to relate to God in a neutral way. Some people like to relate to God as a servant, and some people as who's subordinate, and some people like to relate to God as a servant, but who is very intimate. Not just an ordinary servant, but is very intimate with the master. And then some people like to relate to God as a friend, and then some people who as a friend who's subordinate to his Lord. But there are others who like to relate to the Lord as a servant who's equal to or greater than the Lord, and that's the example of the gopas, or the cowherd boys in the spiritual world with Krishna. Some of them think themselves superior to the Lord. And the Lord likes this. That's why he'll accept a gopa to sit on his shoulders, and they have a fight with another gopa sitting on the shoulders of Balaram. And they accept sort of a subordinate position out of friendship, the love of friendship. And then there are some people that want to have a parental relationship with Krishna, where they think that they are protecting the Lord, just like Vyasadeva. That's like Vasudeva, when he took Krishna out of the prison of Kamsa, he was cradling him in his arms, and he's taking him to save his life, so to say, from the evil Kamsa, and he's taking him to Vrindavan. So from Mathura to Vrindavan, the first time I went to India, I actually I didn't walk, but I took a tanga, a horse cart from I came by train from Delhi to Mathura, and from there I got a cart, a horse and buggy, and a driver, and he took me, and it took about, I would say, a half an hour. He went very slowly. It was a very thin horse, and the driver was singing also most of the way, a very beautiful song. And that was in the early days when I first had my Sony handheld recorder. I had just bought one. They were relatively new at that time. And it's the 1970s. And he was singing, and I recorded it because and it was in the late afternoon, and gradually we went out of the city of Mathura. We ended up in the countryside, and at one point it was like there was no human beings around at a certain point, and I could just hear his singing and the movement of the horse's hoofs on the ground, on the soil, and when we got to Vrindavan, on the outskirts, he stopped, and I was wondering why he stopped, and he pointed to me to get off of the chariot, the Tunga, and then he said, Dhanyavad. And I wasn't sure what he meant, and then he showed me. He bowed down completely to Vrindavan, because we were entering the holy Dham. So he showed that you have to enter with reverence. And I also bowed down and paid my obeisances to Vrindavan, because it's a very holy place. So when we finally reached the temple, which was still a construction site, it hadn't been open yet, and but Prabhupada was there. This was very close to Janmashtami. And I found one devotee who was an Indian, and I said to him, look, this Tunga driver brought me here, but he was singing a song. Can I play it for you and tell me what it means? And he said, yes. So I played it, and he was shocked. He said, oh my God. He said, this is a very, very special song that only great devotees sing, and it's glorifying Vrindavan. And it says that there is one tree in Vrindavan that is very special, and that's where Krishna and Radharani meet. And anyone who goes there, if they look carefully at the leaves, they will see the name of Radha and Krishna written on them, but only a pure devotee will see. I said, wow. I said, where's that temple? And he told me where it was. And it's called the Vamsivata tree. And I said, can I go there? He said, sure, you get one of these persons will take you on the rickshaw. So it was near evening time, and the arti was taking place. So I hired a rickshaw, and I went to the temple where the Vamsivata tree was, and there were a lot of people there, and they were circumambulating the tree and going into the arti of the temple. And I sort of circumambulated the tree. At one point, there were not too many people there, so I jumped up on the concrete that in which the tree is in the middle of it with the soil, and I looked at the leaves, and I didn't see Radha Krishna written on the leaves. And then I jumped back down, and I realized I'm not a pure devotee. But the song said that if there's a pure devotee, they will see the name of Radha and Krishna written on every leaf. So then I realized I better get more serious about my spiritual life. Then I'll be able to see these things. So that's the whole point of this pastime of Radha and of Yasodamai and Krishna. That then it says Tato Drutya, which means she ran very swiftly. Due to the samasa conjunction, these two words become one, and it becomes gopya, or by Shri Yasoda, param amritsam, catching hold of his back. Here, the words atyanta tatodrutya, running behind Krishna very swiftly, implies the Sodarya Vishesha, the excellence of beauty of Yasoda's full breast, broad hips, and so on, as well as the particulars of her affection for her son. The loving use of the word Gopya connotes the grand fortune that came upon the Gopa caste by Krishna preferring to appear among them. By the word Paramristam, caught by his back, the unique attribute of super excellence affection that Bhagavan Sri Krishna feels for Yasodamata, which is called Sneha Visesa, or the excellence of Sneha, or intimacy. In this regard, also, one may search out the following verse from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam 10.9.10. See, that's why the Bhagavatam, once you get to the 10th canto, you enter into the Vrindavan pastimes of the Lord, which are extremely private, and they're not supposed to be explained in public, and because people can't understand it unless they have purified senses and mind. And one purifies the mind and senses by chanting Hare Krishna and respecting Krishna Prasadam. And then, as one progresses through chanting and taking Prasadam, they develop the taste for hearing these transcendental pastimes of the Lord. So it is a science that's been chronicled in the Nectar of Devotion by Srila Rupa Goswami, but actually that science is portrayed here in the Damodarastakam in a very poetic way, and it's not. It's in the words themselves. These transcendental words are portraying all these emotions that are evoked by this loving relationship between a mother and her son. So it says, while chasing after Krishna, the slim-waisted Yasoda's broad hips caused her pace to slow down from running quickly. The flowers had come loose from her hair and were falling after her, but she still continued to pursue him. In this fashion, after chasing and chasing him, she finally caught him from behind. Well, in the Ishopanishad it says, Tad ejiti tad ejiti tad dure tad vantike tad antarasya sarvasya tadu sarvasya bhayataha. This is the 5th mantra of the Ishopanishad, which says that God can run faster than anyone else, and no one can catch him. So how is it possible that Mother Yasoda caught him? Well, this is called the special affection that she has. And she caught him from behind, so she had to catch up to him, but no one is able to catch up to him. But Sri Satyavrata Muni indicates Sri Krishna's special affection for Mother Yasoda. This is called Sneha Vishesha, the excellence of this special affection of the mother for her son. So Sri Satyavrata Muni is declaring that Sri Krishna is Bhakta Vatsala. He has particular affection for his devotees. And because of his affection for his mother, and because of his mother's special affection for her son Krishna, Krishna agreed to be caught by his mother, which is something impossible. But due to love, it becomes possible. Therefore, the greatest force in this world is actually love. And that love is coming originally from the spiritual world. So although we were all with Krishna in the spiritual world, due to our limited free will, we chose to walk away from him. This is unbelievable, but it's a fact. Everyone in the material world is a person. All the living entities were persons originally in the spiritual world, but by becoming attracted to the glitter of the material world, they voluntarily, or we voluntarily, walked away from Krishna into the material world, which is actually a prison house. And the prison house is the body. And the body is definitely a prison because it is subject to birth, old age, disease, and death. And it's subject to time. It's subject to the influence of the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And it is also subject to the three types of miseries: miseries of this body, misery and mind, miseries caused by other bodies, and miseries caused by natural cataclysmic events. So most of the time that we live in this prison called the body, in the bigger prison called the material world, we suffer. And there's all kinds of different sufferings in the material world. Just like, why are there so many doctors with specialties? One that only treats eye, ears, and nose. Another one treats the ankles and the heels and the toes. And it goes like that. There's all these different specialties amongst the doctors, and all those specialties deal with different parts of the body. There's doctors who are specialists in heart. Other doctors are specialists in the kidneys, and other doctors are specialists in the ear, and the other doctors are specialists in the eyes. So all the speciality is to deal with suffering of the body. And therefore, you have these gigantic hospitals everywhere in the world dealing with all these specialties of miseries of the body. So we are in a prison, and we did it voluntarily due to bad decisions. Now, if we did it by bad decisions, if we make good decisions, we can get out of it. That's the whole point of spiritual knowledge. It's to help us to get out of this conundrum of misery, this constant cycle of birth, old age, disease, and death that we're caught in and we're prisoners of. But the idea is that by coming in contact with spiritual people, they relate to us the knowledge that we're not this body, that our real identity is the soul that's animating the body with consciousness and movement and energy. And when the soul leaves the body is dead meat. It is not, it's just matter that is dead. Matter only becomes functional when the soul is present. So this is almost impossible for most people to understand, although it's a simple concept. Just like if you have a cell phone but no battery, does the cell phone work? No. So the cell phone is actually only animated by the energy of the battery. In the same way, the body is only energized by the energy of the soul. Matter itself does not have that energy. So a rock does not move like a human being. It doesn't manifest consciousness. But there is a soul even in the rock. And so there are two souls, basically. There's Krishna as the super soul that's present in every atom of the material creation. And there's the individual soul that's present in the living body. So everything, therefore, has a soul in it. The human body has two souls, the individual living entity and the super soul. The rock has a soul also. It's Krishna in every atom of the rock. So that's therefore rocks sometimes grow and they sometimes diminish. They're actually living in a sense. Mountains also increase and they decrease. Clouds increase and decrease. So anything that increases and decreases has a soul in it. And it can be either an individual soul, like clouds are actually living beings, and they exist for a certain period of time. That's why they give hurricanes names. Hurricane Rita, and Hurricane this and Hurricane that. They are actually persons because they're increasing and decreasing, and they're moving. So this idea of the soul as the real person is almost impossible for most people to understand, and that's why they suffer. They have no knowledge that they have an eternal existence, that you do not die because the body dies. The body is simply like a clothing. When your clothing gets old and you throw it away, you don't die. So it's just a covering of the body. In the same way, the body itself is a covering of the soul. And there's two sections of the covering. There's a gross covering made of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, or space. And the second covering is subtle, made of mind, intelligence, and false ego. Unless one is free of those two coverings, and you free the soul from those two coverings, one remains in ignorance and is forced to go through the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. So here we see when one is free of these coverings and the pure soul can express its love for Krishna in a transcendental body or eternal body that is never deteriorates, never goes through old age, disease, and death, and doesn't have to take birth, it eternally exists, all of a sudden there's an explosion of love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that's what we're experiencing now, this explosion of love that's taking place between Mother Yasoda, this parental love for her son Krishna. And they're having these pastimes. Just like in a home, sometimes the mother is cuddling her child and loves the child and kisses the child. And sometimes the mother says, "You naughty child, you're going to get some punishment." And the child is afraid. And sometimes there's a birthday party, or sometimes there is a outing, and they go hiking, or they go somewhere nice, like a mountain or a forest. So you see, this is what's going on in the spiritual world, but it's multiplied exponentially by the fact that the bodies are eternal, and that there is no question of time being a destroyer of things. Time in the material world is a destroyer. That's why we experience it as past, present, and future. In the spiritual world, and we notice the passing of time. But in the spiritual world, we notice the non-passing of time. There's the eternal present. There's no past and future. There's the eternal present, and in the present, nothing deteriorates. Things increase. There's no deterioration, whereas in the material world, there's deterioration. And we have memories of the past, and we have hopes for the future, and we have anxiety in the present because we don't know if we'll achieve those hopes in the future. That doesn't exist in the spiritual world. See, so we don't really understand what is our real nature, who we actually are, and you can only understand who you are in relationship to other people. So if you relate yourself to people who are in the same dilemma as you are, subject to birth, death, old age, and disease, subject to the illusory, making mistakes, easily being illusioned, having imperfect senses, and having a cheating propensity, then you'll never understand who you are. But if you relate yourself to Krishna, who has a transcendental body, Ajopi-san avyayatma bhutanam ishwaropi-san pakritim swamadistaya sambhavami atmamaya. His body is atmamaya. It's full of transcendental potencies, and he's eternal, and he's beautiful, and everything about him is amplified, and everything is increasing also. You can never measure the beauty of Krishna, because in the process of measuring him, he increases his beauty. So therefore there's this element of eternal delight. So variety is the essential component of happiness, and that variety is always increasing in the spiritual world. It's never decreasing. We can only hope to or aspire for such an existence. But most people are very, very disturbed because of old age, disease, and death, and they think, well, everything is negative. But actually, death is the best moment in the life of a self-realized person, because that's when they are liberated from the cycle of birth and death, if they prepare for it. But most people don't prepare for it because they get flummoxed and they become confused, and they think there's only the body and there's no such thing as the soul, and they think there's only the material world, which is only 1/4 of the creation, or 1/4 of reality. The 3/4 are in the spiritual world, not in the material world. So therefore, we are so dumbed down. Our time-space module is so restricted that we have very, very little understanding of reality. Very little. It's just like looking outside the window of an airplane as you're flying over the Pacific. How much of the Pacific Ocean do you actually see? Hardly anything. So that's what happens when you're trapped in a material body. What we actually see is very, very little of reality. To open up the vista of reality, we have to purify the senses, purify the mind and the intelligence, and purify the ego of the falsities that we are identifying with based on bodily attachments, and open it up to understanding Krishna, the supreme absolute truth. Then we begin to see a great panorama of exciting reality in the spiritual world. And that reality can be seen even in the material world, because Krishna came to the material world to demonstrate his transcendental pastimes in Vrindavan 5,000 years ago. And all of that is chronicled in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So therefore, this Srimad Bhagavatam is the summum bonum of all literature. It encapsulates the full knowledge of God and the spiritual world. Like, for example, you read the Bible, you read the Quran, you read the Granth Sahib, you read the Buddhist literature. There's no description in detail, any detail at all of the spiritual world. There's no description in any detail of the personality of Godhead and what's going on in the spiritual world. There's very, very little information. But the Srimad Bhagavatam explodes. It has a gigantic oceanic explanation of the spiritual world in very deep detail. But yet, we read all these nonsense books, and we go and learn all kinds of nonsense things, and we're not interested in the spiritual knowledge, although it's present. People say, I don't see God. How can I believe in God? Well, you want to see God, you read Srimad Bhagavatam, but more important than reading, you hear it spoken by genuine devotees, and you will see God. You'll see God theoretically first, and then really, because God is in your heart. You don't have to go outside of yourself to see God. God is present in the heart as a super soul. And Krishna says, Sarva Shichaham Hridi Sanavisto Matak Smitir Jnanam Apohanam Cha Vedaischa Sarveraham Eva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Vedavit Eva Chaham. He says, Sarva Shichaham Hridi Sanavisto. I am present in the heart of every living entity. And from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Why forgetfulness? In order to engage in nonsense activities, you have to forget God. But you cannot forget God on your own. You need God's help to forget God. You see? So he will give you total forgetfulness. Then you can go ahead and do all kinds of nonsense, like go to Disneyland and drink wine and eat meat and engage in philandering, this and that. All kinds. There's millions of types of sense gratification in this material world, just like there's millions of emotions of transcendental love in the spiritual world. So everything we see here is present in the spiritual world, but in a pure form. You see, take a globe and divide it in half. So one half, the lower half, is a perverted reflection of the higher half, which is the pure existence. See, so it's just like going to the house of mirrors in the amusement park. And you walk in, and all of a sudden, you look like you weigh 800 pounds, and then you look in another mirror, it looks like you only weigh 60 pounds. So you have these distorted images of yourself. So what we see in the material world are all these distorted images, basically shadows in the dark of reality. But that reality exists because you're seeing the shadow of it. Just like my hand right now, if I look at it a certain way, I can see the shadow of my hand, you see. So if I try and shake hands with the shadow of my hand, nothing happens, right? But the shadow of my hand indicates that there is a real hand. So all these shadow images of what's going on in the spiritual world is actually points to the existence of the spiritual world. But if you try and grab it in the material world, you end up with empty space. You have to purify the senses, purify the mind. And this is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. It's a very important point. I'm going to divert for a short few seconds from the what we're reading so that I can share this verse with you. In order to understand Krishna consciousness, you have to understand this verse. Pranarpanam brahmahavir brahmagno brahmanahutam brahmaiva tena skantavya brahmakarma samadhina. This is the 4th chapter, 24th verse of Bhagavad Gita. Write it down, 4:24. You should read this and the purport or the commentary by Srila Prabhupada. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his or her full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Now, I just read it pretty quickly. You probably don't understand one word of what I just read. And that's normal. I didn't understand this verse for at least 48 years of being in Krishna consciousness. But you have to read the purport. See, if you only read the verses, you'll never really understand anything. You have to read the commentary written by a pure devotee, that's His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So now let's read this purport. How activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. Now that's what we're going to hear, the principle of Krishna consciousness. Now listen carefully. A conditioned soul, when we are conditioned right now, conditioned by this body, and by identifying the body, we become under the conditions of birth, old age, disease, and death, and many other miseries. Okay, so it says a conditioned soul entangled in material contamination is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he or she has to get out of such an environment. It's just like going into a swamp. When you start going into the swamp and start going down into the swamp and you feel as if you might die, what is the thought in your mind? You're not thinking about, tomorrow I'm going to have ice cream and you go to a movie. No, you're thinking, let me get out of this swamp. This is going to kill me. So when you realize how you're actually conditioned in this material world to ignorance and suffering unnecessarily because you have an eternal soul that's not subject to material things, but yet by falsely identifying with the body, you make yourself a victim of the body and all the suffering that it naturally goes through in the material world. So you're in a swamp and you're sinking, and the only thought in your mind should be, how am I going to get out? So it says here, the process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds or yogurt. The materially absorbed, so that's a nice example. Now it's going to show, now it's going to explain how that example is pertinent. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities or sacrifices simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness, or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. The word Brahma, or Brahman, means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahma Jyoti. This spiritual effulgence, his spiritual effulgence, everything that exists is called Brahma Jyoti. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahma Jyoti. And when the Jyoti, or this light, is covered by illusion, or Maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. So that's a profound statement. In other words, when the spiritual light of eternal existence is covered by illusion. Illusion means false ideas that enter into the mind and you become convinced they're true. Those are illusions. And you become delusional in your activity following those false ideas. So, therefore, it says, but illusion is equated with Maya, or sense gratification. So when a person decides that in my life, what's most important to me is sense gratification, gratifying my senses, or self-indulgence, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. But wait a minute, that's what animals do. Human beings should have some extra pastime or some extra activity that's above the animal activity. Yes, they do. That's called bhakti, or devotional service. That is superior to eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Although, even in bhakti, there's eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, but it's different than the mundane eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. See? So, one eats less, one sleeps less, one mates less, and one defends less by engaging in the cultural activities of Krishna consciousness. So instead of glorifying sleeping, one minimizes it. One minimizes the food intake, the sleeping, the mating, and the defending, and maximizes activities of devotion and love for Krishna. This is the complete opposite of what people do in the material world. People in the material world glorify the sleeping and increase it, and buy expensive beds for sleeping, and so forth. So I won't go into all these details. But now, the next part is the most important. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the result are all combined together, Brahman, or absolute truth. The absolute truth covered by Maya, or illusion, is called matter. Matter, dovetailed for the cause of the absolute truth, regains its spiritual quality. This is the point. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the supreme absolute truth. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi, or trance. Now, people become in trance, focusing on how their 401k is increasing, who's winning, who's going to win the Super Bowl, and who is my next victim for sense gratification, and so forth. They're in trance with these things. But when you go into trance of serving Krishna, you are liberated from all this nonsense, and you become transcendentally situated. So this is why we focus on Damodarastakam in this period of Kartik for at least a month, because we want to go into a state of trance focused on this transcendental loving relationship between Yasoda Mai and Krishna, which is purifying. The pure love of a mother who sacrifices everything for her child is purifying to hear about. And to hear of the reciprocal relationship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead who subordinates himself to his mother because of her extreme love for him. This is purifying. That the fact that we can enter into such a relationship, and it's possible for all of us, should be the main attractive feature of our life. We should understand this is actually the goal of life, to enter into these type of pastimes with the Lord. We can do it by hearing about it, but then it can actually happen when we go into a state of trance where we're just like someone is transformed by gaining money on the stock market. They're thinking about it day and night, right? Just like a senator just now was caught. He was on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and they received intelligence back in 2020 that there was going to be a major catastrophe of the COVID virus, and there was going to be a crash of the stock market. So what did he do? As soon as he got off the phone hearing that, he called up his brother and said, call our stockbroker and tell him to sell our stocks right away. So he's transfixed on his stocks. He was not thinking about his duty as a senator to protect the public, to protect the republic and to protect the public. He was just transfixed on his stocks. And now he's caught. And they'll throw him out of the Senate now. Because that's a complete breach of duty. It's complete self-serving, which is completely abominable. So anyway, if we become transfixed on the relationship of Yasoda Mai and Krishna, we become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. So I'm going to finish with one thing, which is very important. It's a purport in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It is the first canto, 8th chapter, 31st verse, and it says, Mother Soda wanted to make a show of punishing her transcendental child, Krishna. She took a rope and threatened to tie him up, as is generally done in the ordinary household. This is 1:831. My dear Krishna, Yasoda took up a rope to bind you when you committed an offense. And this is Kunti Devi speaking, right? And your perturbed eyes overflooded with tears, which washed the mascara from your eyes. And you are afraid, though fear personified is afraid of you. This sight is bewildering to me. So this is Kunti Devi, who's also a pure devotee. And she says, I'm bewildered by this. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, here is another explanation of the bewilderment created by the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is the supreme in all circumstances, as already explained. Here is a specific example of the Lord's being the supreme and at the same time a plaything in the presence of his pure devotee. The Lord's pure devotee renders service unto the Lord out of unalloyed love only. And while discharging such devotional service, the pure devotee forgets the position of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord also accepts the loving service of his devotees more relishably when the service is rendered spontaneously out of pure affection, without any thing of reverential admiration. So reverential admiration is going on in Vaikuntha, but not in Goloka Vrindavan. The Supreme Lord also accepts the loving service of his devotees more relishably when the service is rendered spontaneously out of pure affection, without anything of reverential admiration. Generally, the Lord is worshipped by the devotees in a reverential attitude, but the Lord is meticulously pleased when the devotee, out of pure affection and love, considers the Lord to be less important than himself. The Lord's pastimes in the original abode of Goloka Vrindavana are exchanged in that spirit. The friends of Krishna consider him one of them. They do not consider him to be of reverential importance. The parents of the Lord, who are all pure devotees, consider him a child only. The Lord accepts the chastisements of the parents more cheerfully than the prayers of the Vedic hymns. So, what are most people doing? They're reciting the Purusha Sukta, they're reciting the Narayana Sukta, they're reciting all these transcendental prayers, right? It says here, the Lord accepts the chastisements of his parents more cheerfully than the prayers of the Vedic hymns. Similarly, he accepts the reproaches of his fiancées more palatably than the Vedic hymns. So sometimes he's rebuked by Rukmini Devi or Satyabhama or something, one of his 16,000 wives. So when the Lord is present in the material world to manifest his eternal pastimes of the transcendental realm of Goloka Vrindavana as an attraction for the people in general, he displayed a unique picture of subordination before his foster mother, Yasoda. The Lord, in his naturally childish, playful activities, used to spoil the stock butter of Mother Yasoda by breaking the pots and distributing the contents to his friends and playmates, including the celebrated monkeys of Vrindavana, who took advantage of the Lord's munificence, in other words, his charity, his copious charity. Mother Yasoda saw this, and out of her pure love, she wanted to make a show of punishment for her transcendental child. She took a rope and threatened the Lord that she would tie him up, as is generally done in the ordinary household. Seeing the rope in the hands of Mother Yasoda, the Lord bowed down his head and began to weep just like a child, and tears rolled down his cheeks, washing off the black ointment smeared about his beautiful eyes. This picture of the Lord is adored by Kunti Devi because she is conscious of the Lord's supreme position. He is feared often by fear personified, yet he is afraid of his mother, who wanted to punish him just in an ordinary manner. Kunti was conscious of the exalted position of Krishna, whereas Yasoda was not. Therefore, Yasoda's position was more exalted than Kunti's. Mother Yasoda got the Lord as her child, and the Lord made her forget altogether that her child was the Lord himself. If Mother Yasoda had been conscious of the exalted position of the Lord, she would certainly have hesitated to punish the Lord. But she was made to forget this situation because the Lord wanted to make a complete gesture of childishness before the affectionate Yasoda. This exchange of love between the mother and the son was performed in a natural way, and Kunti, remembering the scene, was bewildered, and she could do nothing but praise the transcendental filial love. Indirectly, Mother Yasoda is praised for her unique position of love, for she could control even the all-powerful Lord as her beloved child. My suggestion is meditate on this today, on this purport by Prabhupada. This, in a very short statement, covers the deep transcendental meaning of the Damodarastakam. And if we can enter into it by meditating on these words that Prabhupada has written so expertly, we will be elevated spiritually so that we too can enter into these transcendental pastimes. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande Haribol. It's amazing how he put that right in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Are there any questions? Okay, yeah. Yeah. Namamishvaram Sachidanantarupam Vasat Kundalam Gokule Bhajamanam Yasoda Biyolu Kala Davamanam Padam Jishtam Adyanta Todrutya Gopya Rudam Tamuhu Netra Yugmam Rijakam Karam Boja Yugmena Satanka Netram Muhurswasa Kampa Trirekanka Kanta Stita Gaivam Damodaram Bhakti Padam Iti Driksvalila Bir Ananda Kunde Swagosamni Majantam Agyarpayantam Tadiyesita Gesu Bhakta Jitatvam Punak Prematastam Sata Riti Vrande
Tadiyeshitanesu Bhakta Jitatvam Puna Prematastam Sata Vrati Vande
Varam Deva Moksham Na Mokshavadim Va Na Chanya Vrineham Vare Sadapiha
Varam Deva Moksham Na Moksham Vadim Va Nachayam Vraneham Varesai Sadapiha
Idam Teva Purnata Gopala Balam Sada Me Manasa Virastam Kimanyai
Idam Teva Purnatha Gopala Balam Sada Me Manasi Avirastam Kimanye
Idam Te Mukam Bojam Adyanta Nilai Ritam Kuntalai Stikta Raktascha Gopya
Idam Te Mukham Bojam Atyanta Nile Vratam Kuntale Stigna Raktascha Gopya
Vimuhushchumbitam Bimbaraktam Daram Me Manasa Virastam Malam Lakshalabai
Muhushchumbitam Bimbarakta Me Manasiya Virastam Alam Lakshalabhe
Namo Deva Damodarananta Vishnu Prasiddha Prabhu Dukha Jalabdi Magnam
Namo Deva Damodarananta Vishnu प्रसीद प्रभो दुःखजलाभिमग्नम्
Kripa dristi vristiyati dinam batanu Grihanesa mahamajnam ediyakshi dristyai
कृपादृष्टि वृष्यति दिनं बतानु ग्रहनिशमम् अज्ञम् यदि यक्षि दृश्ये
Kuvera atmajo badamudyaiva yadvad Tvaya mochito bhakti bhajo kritocha
कुबेरात्मजाौ बाधा मूर्तया यद्वत् त्वया मोचिताौ भक्ति भजौ कृतस्य
Tata prema bhaktim swakame prayacha Namokse graho mesti damodareha
तथा प्रेम भक्ति स्वकमे प्रयास्या नमो शीघ्रहो मेस्ति दामोदरेहा
Namate studamne spuradipti damne Tvadiyodarayata vishvasedamne
नमस्ते स्तु धाम्ने स्फुरदीप्ति धाम्ने त्वदीयोदारायथा विश्वस्य धाम्ने
Namo radhikaya tvadiya priyaya Namo nanta lilaya deya vetubhyam
नमो राधिकायै त्वदीया प्रियाय नमो दन्तलीलाय देवाय तुभ्यम्
Namo radhikaya tvadiya priyaya Namo nanta lilaya devaya tubhyam
नमो राधिकायै त्वदीया प्रियाय नमो नन्तलीलाय देवाय तुभ्यम्
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jayo Radha Nila Madhavra,
Jaya Radha Nila Madhavra,
Bolo Jaya Radha Nila Madhavra,
Jaya Radha Nila Madhavra,
Radha Nila Madhavra,
Radha Nila Madhavra,
Jayo Radha Nila Madhavra,
Jaya Radha Nila Madhavra,
Haribo, Haribo, Nitai Gaur Haribo.
Nitai Gaur Haribol, Nitai Gaur Haribol.
Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Damodarastakam ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pararaja Gachasta Tarasatara Shishi Shimari's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Antakoti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Pramsika Hosha Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda ki jai. Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samkunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Sri Madhapur Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Tulasi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ganga Maya ki jai, Jamuna Maya ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktavinda ki jai, Damodarastakam ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tenamani. Namaste Saraswati Devi, Guruvani Pachani Devi, Sesa Sunyavadi, Paskatya Desatani, Gaur Premanandi, Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. So your homework tomorrow is 1-8-31. 1-8-31. Haribol.